Thank you for coming. On Tuesday evening, we noticed that there was a hole in the Perl 6 track in this room. I thought, well, why not? So I prepared some slides. These are my slides. And I think I'm going to actually just start with this one. So are there any questions?
I'm confused about local and how it's talked about in Perl 5 and 6. Is it dynamic extent or not?
So the question is if I understand correctly, local in Perl 5, is that the same as dynamic variables in Perl 6?
No. Is it the more general concept of dynamic extent from scheme, for example?
Well, I know how local is implemented in Perl 5, which is basically just a global, but we just save the value away from now, and then whenever we exit the scope, we put it back, which is, I don't know, it's a hack at least.
Yeah, so that sounds like pretty much the definition of dynamic extent. So what's in Perl's?
Well, the fact that the big difference between that and in Perl 6 is that dynamic variables are lexical. So in Perl 5, if you define a local foo, it actually you're creating a global foo that just happens to be saved in your scope and then returned. Whereas in Perl 6, if you create a dynamic variable, $foo, it will only exist in that scope, and it just happens to be that whenever you try to refer that from anything in the stack, it will just look up and find it there. But once you exit that scope, there's no knowledge of it anywhere in the world anymore. Right? Whereas in Perl 5, there's still a global foo around.
Right.
And the Perl 5 approach doesn't scale into multi-threading very well. Whereas the Perl 6 approach, if you have a separate thread with the same named variable, it's actually in a different lexical path. All that being said, there is a mechanism for doing things like local. We call it temp instead.
But I'm interested in the dynamic scope aspect of it.
Why? The semantics are different. We pick the other semantics because it's multi-thread safe. It's on the face of it, it's less efficient to look up the stack.
I don't have an extra microphone here, do I? I don't have to just. I should have kept your phone and just your microphone.
It's in theory less efficient to look up the stack, but you can always cache. So we have a rudimentary cache.
So I noticed in the documentation I don't see it using the phrase dynamic scope. Is there a reason?
It doesn't use the phrase dynamic scope?
Certainly not in the Perl 5 docs. I don't remember it.
Well, yeah. I'm not very familiar with Perl 5 documentation anymore. I haven't touched it for the past 5.5 years. So sorry about that.
But you have nothing against that concept?
That particular term, dynamic scope, no. It's just, it can mean different things to different people.
Okay, so I guess we can call this answered.
Thank you.
So I would say, next question.
If we have something like 2 or 3 pieces of code that differently define it, is it possible to run all of them in the same lexical scope? So I mean, if I have defined the variable like as a my one block of code, and I want to use this in another one, which I'm, for example, sourcing from a file, like just a text.
So you actually, okay, let me rephrase the way I understand it. So is it possible to actually access lexical variables from other scopes?
Well, no, I actually want to run 3 different blocks of code in the same lexical scope.
Yeah.
But
simultaneously or?
No. Okay. Just like one by one.
Yeah.
And if I'm asking because I want this idea to be implemented like maybe there is the software for the Python which is called Jupyter. It's widely used for the machine learning. So what they're doing, they have like you're writing the code, it's evaluating this, you're writing documentation. After that, you're writing another piece of code, and it's run just after the first one. And
I'm not sure if I understand
it
the
shares
question.
the same scope.
Yeah. Python scoping is a little weird though. I mean, they tend to do subroutine scoping rather than.
So
The concept where you want to bind a block to a lexical environment and then execute it. It sounds like what you're saying. You're saying here's a block, use this lexical scope, run it in that, run it in that.
Yeah, but I want to all of the block, which I probably don't even know now, but the future blocks also will be run at the same scope. So they will share all the variables which we were defined previously.
Yeah, so can you execute a block in an arbitrary environment?
well, one way of doing that is making them all dynamic and having a scope under that basically has those.
There's various ways to cheat on it. Certainly, if you eval some text of code, that runs in the lexical. Inside the lexical scope, the eval itself has its own lexical scope, but you can always evaluate something and in fact, there are ways internally to say, this is my outer lexical scope, even though I didn't compile it outside of myself. There's ways of putting that linkage in. So if it's not something that's directly accessible right now, it's very close to something that could be implemented. A lot of the stuff we've done in the design of Perl 6 is saying we can't be all things to all people right off the bat, but we can think about how to make it close to where someone could actually take it that extra step.
So I can show you the underlying techniques in that, because it actually is already exposed in something called eval. And where does that live again?
We also use the same basic sort of look up to an arbitrary out there lexical scope. That's a lot of other languages talk about a setting that is a set of definitions that is before your code. I mean, not a setting. They call it a prelude. We call it a setting because it is actually, we consider it an outer lexical scope of your program. And so that is not actually compiled outside your program, but it acts that way. So it actually makes a little hookup that says, oh, your outer lexical scope is this setting. And that's where we get all our core functions from.
So eval, it's not actually documented, but you can actually specify a name parameter in eval.
There it is.
Which is the context in which it's supposed to run.
So that's used.
And why do we need that? Because we also have a no, where does that live? Cool. Okay. So here, because we have a method, if you would call the sub-eval in there, it would actually use the scope of that method, which you don't want. So actually, we actually pass on here the caller scope, the caller context as a parameter. So that's why we can have an eval sub and an eval method.
With one delegating to the other.
Yeah, when one delegates to the other.
So we actually do use that kind of mechanism internally. It says we don't really go to great extents to advertise.
Yeah, didn't we have something called lift?
It was proposed, but we don't.
Yeah, it was removed from the spec even, I think. Yeah. So if you really want to get into that, you can. Will it always continue to work? Well, this is considered internals, but we, I guess in Perl, have a history of using internals.
If it's not tested in roast, then it's not guaranteed.
Exactly. So that would mean that we have concluded this question. Let's make sure. Yes, okay.
So the internal representation of objects and the name of the
attributes?
private variables or whatever? Or is that stored like a hash, or what is the actual internal?
Okay, the question is.
Supposed to know.
Well, so the question is the internal representation of an object, does it actually, is it a hash like it is in Perl 5 mostly, or is it something else? And the answer is yes and no, as far as I understand. The way I understand it at compile time, we actually, or basically it stays around, because you can actually ask an object, what are your attributes, right, using the mob. But internally, at least in MoreVM, they actually turned into an array where they actually have slots in the object. So actually internally, I think in an object, if it's an opaque object, it's actually an array.
I guess the right answer is it depends on the backend.
Well, yeah,
It's going to be different on a JavaScript backend.
We intentionally separate what we call the representation specification from the object's view of itself.
Yeah.
So the representation in this case is P6 opaque, and the opaque means, as I said, you don't have to care what is underneath. It might be a hash or it might not.
There's one important thing though that you need to realize is that the key to the hash is not actually the attribute name, but also the class to which it belongs. That's why you can actually have attributes mixed into objects from other roles with the same name before. The original code will know what to handle the old one, and the other one should know how to handle the new one. Yeah. Sorry. Yes. Okay.
I wonder if Damien's talk would make sense in Perl 6 context. Could we have a module that defines a keyword to keyword?
Okay, the question is, could we have a module that defines a keyword keyword? Actually, you don't, because you can almost...
It's kind of built in.
Well, I mean, if you really want to go and change the grammar, that's a little more involved because you would need to make a slang. But keywords as such hardly exist in Perl 6 because they're all subs really. So it's just a matter of making, I mean, if you want to create a new operator, it's just a special kind of sub. I can show you that.
Yes, show us.
So, so an operator is just something that is a subroutine with a very, very special name. So if I want to create a foo infix routine that takes 2 parameters, and I will make it basically, well, whatever, concatenated with foo, right? I can now say ABC foo df. And if I actually say it, you can actually see it.
Useless use of
So that's all you need to actually create a new operator.
Most of it is already built in what you would need to add functionality to.
So
there are some. We have routines called grammatical categories. Infix is one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Postfix,
prefix.
So those are already very easy to override.
Yeah.
Also circumfixes and post-circumfixes. But on the statement level, usually just write a function or something like that. And there is a sort of half-baked macro system in there.
Yeah. I'd rather not mention macros because it's all still up in the air.
But
So yeah, it's already quite malleable as it is. Now, of course, when Jonathan added reacts and whenever, which are basically just syntactic sugar for calling some subs, then he actually needed to actually make sense.
That actually is using a keyword.
Yeah, that's actually a keyword kind of thing that you need to change the grammar for. Or like some slangs, like slang that actually allows you to add an exclamation mark at the end of any identifier. That is something that you need to do in the
But actually, you can do that now with about half a line of code now.
Okay, so we need to actually change that one.
I just don't have it hooked up with the slang keyword yet.
Okay, so we're getting close there.
Getting close, yeah. I mean, it has to start begin right now, and then poke something into the current language definition.
The only thing that you may have noticed when I ran this, it's taking about half a second. And
now it takes a long time to recalculate a new.
Basically, we're creating a new grammar, and at the moment, the cloning of the grammar is, or the subclassing of the grammar is something that is not entirely optimized.
That's another thing that I'm working on.
That's just initial offset.
That's initial, and you should also realize that whenever you pre-compile this into a module, right, it's no longer there because it all turns into ASTs and to bytecode and whatever, so you don't actually have that overhead anymore. So that's why, like something like text CSV internally uses slang toxic because somebody decided he actually did want to be able to actually have space between the paren open and the subroutine that you're calling, and without it he couldn't live. So we actually created a slang that allows you to do that. But you don't actually need to have your own code run in slang toxic because it's pre-compiled text CSV and actually runs faster if you don't, because then it doesn't have to recompile the grammar.
Yeah, we can make that faster.
Yeah, but
right now it just copies the whole.
Exactly.
Everything, and it should just reuse bits of it in a tail recursive fashion.
Additional question.
Yep.
Can I define a precedence level for my new point?
Can you?
Precedence.
Precedence level. Yes, you can. There's actually what are the traits? Is tighter, is looser?
Is looser, is equiv.
Yeah. So.
So you can make something the same as another operator, or tighter, or looser.
Yeah. The question was, can you actually indicate the precedence of the operator? Yes, you can.
Yes.
With traits.
Yeah, the question after that is, well, how many levels of precedence are you allowed? Infinite.
Yeah.
It's a good answer.
As long as you
because our precedences are actually represented with strings, and it does a string comparison. And it just adds on more.
I prefer to call that unlimited.
Unlimited.
Not
arbitrary.
Arbitrary, unlimited.
Yeah, okay.
As long as you have enough memory, then it's okay.
If you have an infinite memory, then you have enough.
Okay, that was a good question. Thank you.
Yeah.
May I get back to my question again?
Yes, sure.
Because I tried and it doesn't work. So I'm defining the variable.
Okay, well, you're using single quotes instead of double quotes. Okay. Next question.
No.
Yes?
Yeah, but I'm evaluating this.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay, sorry. That was too quick.
And when I'm doing the second eval, it says that $y doesn't exist.
Let's see if I can.
That's because the two evals have their own scope.
I define it.
Okay, so.
Both.
Sure, we really turn this into a hackathon.
But if you initialize the variable in the first eval, it won't be in the outer lexical scope that you're using. So.
Okay.
So is there any way?
Is there any way you could probably?
What's the question?
Well, you
right now we do something like that in the command line.
But you probably want to.
We do it by infinitely. There's that word again. Arbitrarily nesting evals, basically.
Oh,
yeah.
That was fun. I did that.
It's really sort of cheating. You'd really like to just have hooks in the grammar where it just keeps the lexical scope open. But
but you get, I think one trick would be probably to returning my colon as a result of the eval.
Maybe.
And use that onwards from there on.
Or put it somewhere where you can get at it, the other one. Yeah.
This would also be very useful for inline Perl 6. Well, the inline Perl 6 allows you to run some Perl 6 code, but it doesn't give you anything because you lose the lexical scope. Everything is lexical. The variables, the modules you load.
I mean, certainly you can pass a lexical scope around like that. Whether you can add stuff to a lexical scope is more problematic.
Yeah.
Because at the end of a compilation unit, which is a compilation unit, we close the lexical scope and say, you may not add anything to this lexical scope. So as long as everything is declared in your first eval, and you take the my from that and pass it on to the others, it might work.
Yeah. Just don't try to add anything to it.
Well, without heavier cheating.
Yeah.
You have to find the bit that says this is closed and unclose it. But don't do that.
Don't go there, I would say. So, because, in the best case, you get a global de-optimization every time. And in the worst case,
if we notice. If we don't notice, then you just get weird things happening. Undefined behavior.
Yeah, undefined behavior. So, okay. Maybe.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that was a good question, but anyway, okay.
That was the not version of it.
Yeah. That's
exclamation marks are rather overloaded.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I could have put a column there, but
yeah.
That's even more.
Nobody gets to
you want question, and bang, bang. If you're going to do that.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, so I know I can access variables using the double colon and the parentheses to access. Let's say I have a variable foo, and inside variable bar I store the word foo, and I can access it using that. Can I create it? Can I do my? I mean, I've tried it and it didn't work.
My doesn't allow that.
No.
My doesn't allow it.
No.
It doesn't allow you to poke things in other scopes. Scopes.
How would
the
I
question
do
is kind
that?
You pretty much have to use our for that sort of thing.
Or use a hash.
So our would allow me to program.
Well, our is
our is basically globals that are in packages.
Yeah.
So you can always add stuff to those that you don't.
So I can use the double colon. Is it the same syntax as when you access it to create?
That's a good question.
Because
I don't know. We might just disallow that syntax under declarator arbitrarily. It's one of those features nobody's quite asked for yet.
Right now.
But
does that work?
I don't think so. But
I guess the answer is no at the moment.
Well, I think that's quite what she's asking. You're asking about the parens form, the symbolic lookup.
That one. Exactly.
Okay, sorry.
So I know how I can access them programmatically, but not how to create them.
But that's probably not going to work.
That's a symbol, and of course,
nobody's actually declared it, and you don't have a $sign on it.
Intriguing.
You're using single quotes in the terminal and inside of the.
That's that.
This happens to me every other day.
So.
Okay. Now.
No.
Yeah, you have to define it.
Her follow-up is: can you say our colon? Not capitals, just our as a declarator. Can you declare our
okay, yeah.
with the symbolic reference? And I don't know
Yes,
the answer
that.
to that.
Malformed hour.
Yeah, it's just us allowing them under declarators.
I kind of want it.
What?
Because if, I don't know. I mean, if I can programmatically access it, I want to be able to create it.
Well, what happens?
Well,
What happens if you just leave out the hour there?
that's a symbol.
Yeah.
But you haven't defined food.
That's exactly the point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You wanted to define it.
I do. I don't
There's
know.
some place where we allowed something like that. I don't know what it was. In principle, it could be made to work.
Yeah, but
I may have done something like that because require is a runtime construct,
Uh-huh.
and it kind of defines symbols. But I'm not sure anymore. I try to forget most of what I did there.
and you documented it, right?
Of course not.
Job security. Okay. Yeah.
I hope you forgive me for asking, keeping to ask beginner questions.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, but
Any questions?
you have to.
The other day I saw code that imported modules
Sometimes
with funny author names.
it is problems. Yeah, so it's working on the same.
Could you elaborate on that? How does it work that you can have different versions of a module and
Okay. So how does it work that you can have different versions of a module installed? Right. Okay. I would say that's a good
How
question.
does it work? Perl.
I gave a whole talk on the topic, German Perl workshop last night, I think.
Well, we have another role at the program.
It's one of those. That's one of those things where when we specified Perl 6, we said we really want that. Wave hands, and it turns into a torment the implementer on behalf of the user. But we really do
How
want
does it
that.
basically work? Well, basically we said, okay, we're going to have something called a mythical repo object because we basically want to make this all of this pluggable because we actually want to support a situation where you only work with precompiled binaries that you download from some place. Like if you have a very small device and you would only want to have just whatever installed and only have the binaries. Right. So the repo object is what takes care of that. Right. So we basically said, okay, well, this mythical repo object should be able to support multiple versions, etc. Then I sort of tried to describe that and got myself into trying to hook that into Perl 6, and I completely and utterly burned out on that. And Stefan and Nick Logan.
Well, Jonathan created a design document on how to do this. He was very much inspired by Git, and Git is storing objects on the file system, and the key to that is the contents of the file. A SHA hash of the contents of the file, and he very much liked the idea, and he kind of infected me on that.
On a semantic level, you have to have the idea of a unique identity for these different versions. Right? So a different version of a module is a different module. It's just the version is sort of part of its name.
Yeah.
And of course, once you have that unique identity, then it becomes much easier to manage the multiple versions. Then you get.
That was also the thing that we needed to support Unicode module names on non-Unicode file systems, case-sensitive module names on case-insensitive file systems. So you need some kind of identity that.
Okay,
that's
this
what
is
the whole
something that
repo.
takes in detail. I think I
The real answer is, I guess the full name of the module is the name plus the auth plus the API plus the version. That's the real long name.
Yes.
And you can only have one, and that's how we deal with it.
And hopefully, if you get something of that long name from out in the wide world, it is identical to anything you get from anywhere else. You shouldn't care where you get it from as long as that identifier is correct.
this partial. So, of course, that's a question. Use foo when you have foo1 and foo2 installed. If you actually were not more specific than that, it will actually fail, or should fail. It should not actually tell you, well, I have multiple versions of this foo module that you want to load, but you're not saying which one you want.
It does not fail now, it will give you the highest version.
Okay, well, I guess we had this argument already before.
Unless you told it a specific version, then you will get that as long as it's installed.
Okay,
Because many places want to nail down the exact version numbers. Especially big Wall Street banks, they want to have exact control over exactly which version they're using. And so if they say use this version, they want it to be that version. That was part of it.
And then you need to install that version, and then it will run with that version.
And that's actually what we recommend for everyday code. You install a module that you need, you use it as a dependency, you have a certain version that you test it against. And you should specify this exact version because that's the version you know that works. You don't know if the next version the author releases will still work unless you test it.
But some other module may bring in that other version, like that will work in the same program as well.
Exactly.
Now the question is, do they have some shared resource that is going to fight? And if you get into that situation, the modules are badly written. Because then you should abstract that shared thing out into something else that those two both use. So like a database handle or something. They shouldn't both be holding a database handle.
They will each have their own global variables anyway.
Whatever the identity, it's identity.
Can it statically be found out before nice argument?
Okay, so similar question. So as far as things interacting, most of the time I haven't had any problems, but when I have one module declare the same constant as the other variable, it just totally broke everything.
Yeah.
And I had to change. So I think a module defined some
By
constant,
default,
right?
they're hour.
What?
By default, constants are hour, not mine. So if you declare my constant,
Well, it declared just constant.
That's an hour.
Yeah, so the two different modules had different constants.
And they
we
probably
sort of
export them.
You couldn't use it together.
We sort of think of constants
So they shouldn't have done that,
by
right?
default as going into the subroutine namespace, which, or the type namespace, I should say rather, which is also hour. It's just sort of a constant is a type that just happens to have one value. Is how we think of it. So
yeah.
So
that's
It might have a defined value.
Making them hour, but you can. In good practice, in many cases, we declare it mine instead.
Okay, and so
But if
anything declared as hour can conflict if you use two modules? Like module...
Well, the thing is that this is, if it's exporting to constant,
not explicitly.
it should be
it's just-
exporting it to the lexical scope of where you do the import, because we have lexical scope.
There have been disagreements on the subject of whether those collisions should be counted as collisions or not, or whether to what extent we can say, oh, they're declaring the same thing. It doesn't matter that it's a two-state declaration.
I mean, I would encounter it, I tried to run it and it gave me an error about the compilation unit not like conflict or I don't remember exactly the error.
Yeah.
Right.
Something about Perl 6 module load global
It's something like that.
conflict resolution.
Well, that's
So
make a ticket for it so we can actually.
this is what we call LTA.
Yeah.
A less than awesome error message.
I've only encountered it with the constants declared as constant foo. But are you saying that that is the same as hour? Does it have the same?
It implies hour by
It implies hour.
In
Okay.
Like class
whether
implies
say
hour.
class or module, it implies hour by default.
Okay, and hour variables are automatically exported.
They're basically automatically global.
So
separate
they're global
packages.
to that, yeah. They're not automatically exported, but
Yeah, if you have two units trying to use the same package name,
then you have a
Well, I thought I remember there being some problem with conflicts of there's some conflicts that hadn't been fixed yet, and I thought eventually that should not be possible, and it should not export them, or at least not conflict.
Well, maybe we should take this into a ticket and take a follow up.
But certainly there's probably some more things we can do better.
So, okay.
To sum it up, since we have several Perl 6 developers confusing the audience here, this whole thing that you should be able to have multiple versions installed and use them in the same program, this was all very good intentions and some attempts of figuring out how it could work, but all in all, this is new territory for all of us.
This is like PhD research. I mean, we've done like 50 PhD dissertations to design Perl 6, and
we've done lots of work in that direction,
yeah,
but it's far from finished.
This is an ABD, all the dissertation, or something like that.
It works pretty well though.
In spots.
Next question.
So I know that Perl 5 is using the concept of copy and write for strings PV. Mm-hmm. Is there a similar thing in Perl 6, and is it extended to other structures than strings?
That's a very.
We do not have mutable strings.
Exactly. All strings are immutable.
I work on more VM, which is the virtual machine. So all the strings are, once they have been shown to Perl 6, so the VM constructs a string. Once you tell Perl 6 that it exists, you can't change the string. And what you can do is when you concatenate two strings, it basically creates a new string called a rope made of multiple strands. So that'll be a new string. You've got these two strings, and it's basically references to the two other strings. So, and you can also get substrings of the main string, but you can't just get rid of the main string. So you could have the original string, you make a substring of most of it, and as long as you get rid of the first string, then you could change that data.
So you make substring of the main string and read-only access.
But Perl 6 has to see it as a new string. So whenever you change it, it gets updated, the reference to the variable. But once the Perl 6 has to do something to it to have it be changed. Does that make some sense?
And
as far as I know, we do some optimizations and could do more.
Yeah.
But
I also
we do rely on strings being immutable.
Yeah. But if there's no path to the string anymore, it will get garbage collected.
Yeah.
If you want to have a mutable string, then what we actually provide is called a buff, short for buffer.
Oh, buffer.
And a buffer is essentially a string that you can modify the bits of.
I guess that's going to be the last question because we're almost so much.
Is there any plans to recreate something like we have in a Golem, where you can just import the module from the GitHub, just writing like GitHub/user/
Is there any plans on actually allowing just using a module from GitHub?
Yeah. So and
it would be easy to implement in terms of what we already have.
Yeah.
Modules will happen.
You can actually. The only thing that you need to do is actually write a repo module that does that.
I think Nick already has done this.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Oh, you might.
That's why you made this whole thing pluggable. So if you want to actually just say use something on GitHub and make it work in your program, you just make sure that you have a repo module that supports that.
Repo module.
And that's very simple to write. It's a simple class, and you have to implement like 3 methods, and
which will download.
One of them gets a component dependency specification, which is basically the name of the module and maybe version and maybe the other parts. And it's
sort of wild card.
It's supposed to return the loaded computation unit, and you have lots of infrastructure available. So the whole GitHub thing is probably like this much code with a large font size.
Okay. So. So that would be a good entry point for you to actually support the Perl 6 effort. Thank you very much. Okay, that was a quick one then. I think we still have 5 minutes. So
what feature are you currently working on you're very excited to bring?
What feature am I currently working on that I'm very excited about? I'd really like to get back to getting race and hyper work. I'm not currently working on that, but I did write a prototype early this year that sort of did what it's supposed to do. Currently, I've been working a lot on set operators, making them faster and actually do something sensible. Apparently, we are at the edge of scientific research with regards to mixes.
The relationship with bags and sets.
Yeah, so what is the symmetric difference of multiple mixes where the weights can actually be negative and stuff like that. So that's more or less completed right now. Currently I'm fixing some issues with junctions and concatenation. And yeah, anything else that comes along my way, really.
But as far as junctions, it always, when you use them, it always creates a junction object, right?
So if you
junctions,
currently, yeah.
We could probably in the optimizer.
There is some of that.
Is there some?
There are some simple things that actually just turn it into this or that with another thing. But it's fairly simple-minded right now. And we really ought to have ways of looking at some junctional logic and saying, oh, we could actually thread this through and do these tests, you know, with this expression on each value and short-circuit the whole junction.
Yeah.
But we
I did actually do some tests on trying to actually thread junctions, but so far you need at least 500 to 1,000 elements in your junction before it actually makes sense.
That's real threading, I mean. I'm just talking about evaluating the depth first instead of width first.
Okay.
So that you don't have to generate all these, you don't actually have to generate the entire junction. You generate this piece of the junction and then this piece of the derivative junction and this piece of the derivative junction, and then you do the test, you pop, we haven't falsified it yet, so let's go back and try some more. Let's scrub it.
Yeah.
That sort of thing we have not done yet, but it is.
I did some work on the boolefication of junctions that makes a shortcut as soon as it sees something that is true and stuff like that, so it actually doesn't need to do anything else.
Junctions are one of those things that we wanted the user view to be correct first. And we wanted people to think of them as creating a junction object and then creating another junction object out of that. The other is just optimization and tormenting implementers.
Okay, one last question.
I'd like to ask about generic methods. Is there sufficient support in Perl 6 to do like I think Haskell does
generic
a whole
methods
class system based around types rather than
Essentially what that's what our roles are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Roles are our version of generics.
and guards.
Maybe this is an answer to your question. Let me see if I can.
I mean, we even use roles internally. We use them heavily. You can use them at compile time, like small puff traits, pull stuff together. Use them at runtime to mix things. SAT.
Sorry.
I don't know how to read that.
Yeah, that's a sort of shorthand. That is.
Sorry. Yeah, maybe I should take the longer one.
That's not. Yeah. Eventually, that underneath that mixes in a role.
Yeah.
But it's a role that adds the
so
method for true.
I also don't know how to read that.
Yeah. But is the operator that does make sense. But But role is dynamic, right?
So here I'm mixed
in
in.
this case, but is dynamic.
Yeah.
But when you create a class, you can also tell it to, at compile time, in parallel, mix in roles.
So
this is how small talk traits work, and it will actually, if there's a conflict between your
So I have
compile time mix-ins, it will actually say you have a conflict, you have to resolve this. So you get compile time safety instead of with ordinary mix-ins. If you mix in something and you mix in something else and there's a conflict, it just overrides the previous one, just as a derived class does.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't get the safety of knowing that you had a collision. But with compile time.
So we're creating an anonymous role here that has one message called bool that always returns true. So we're not actually interested in the body. And then we're saying the value. We're basically calling .gist on it. And here I'm calling it with a question mark in front of it. We basically calls method bool on it. So in general, this would not be true, but is now. Does that answer your question a little bit?
A little bit, yeah.
And roles can be parameterized.
Yeah.
And with full signatures, pattern matching, and everything as you're applying roles. So they're very powerful.
Is there something that talks about that?
In an academic sense?
No, in like how do you do this in Perl if you wanted to do like a Haskell style?
I don't think we have much of a guide to Perl 6 for Haskell programmers yet.
Actually, don't we?
We're getting to the point where I can't keep track of it all. And I love the feeling of losing control. It's like,
seems that the network is not really working.
You might need to authenticate again.
Yeah, probably.
Let me just get the network here.
Yeah, it works fine.
That works fine.
It works fine for
Yeah,
me as well, but
Go do an HTTP only.
All right, so
the same way it breaks in C++, right?
No.
there you go.
Well, it's similar, only better.
Just go to docs.perl6.org, type in Haskell, and you wind up here.
Generics are a little bit more general than templates.
Yeah.
Templates are Turing complete.
So
How can I get more
I
general
don't know
than
if
that?
this talks about generics or not.
I don't think templates have guards effectively.
I don't know what guards are.
but
You know,
if there's something missing here,
templates are Turing complete. You can probably finagle it
I
somewhere.
see compilers.
if you have something, find something missing here, ask a question on the Perl 6 channel and basically make sure that we have a documentation issue. And then we can maybe fix it. Okay, thank you very much. I've been told that this is the end. Thank you very much for coming here on such short notice, and hope to see you more on the Perl 6 channel. Thank you.